Hi everybody, I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
We own and operate Driftwood Guitars in Northwest Florida, where we build custom, handmade acoustic and electric guitars.
We've been hanging out at the StewMac headquarters shooting a video series all about aerosol spray finishing.
We're talking about pro-level aerosol spray finishing.
Which is something you can totally do with no experience right at home.
All right, that's a wrap. Everybody go home now.
We're almost done spraying a beautiful finish on the Strat style guitar. In the last 2 episodes, we went over the very important steps of properly preparing your guitar for finish. This is our last opportunity to fix any issues with the wood. Then we took our time applying our color coats.
People think that they can spray it all on in one coat. Big rookie mistake.
And finally, our clear coats.
Each coat actually melts into the coat that's above it. Today, we're gonna take this guitar across the finish line by doing all of the wet sanding and the final buffing. And when we're done, we're gonna have a guitar that looks just as good as anything you could buy off the shelf. So let's get started. Welcome to the final episode of this series. At this point, it's been 2 weeks, and this is what it looks like. We've done the pore fill, the vinyl seal, 3 coats of color, and then 14 coats of clear. I couldn't be more happy with how it looks. I've seen final finishes that look just about this good, and we still got a little ways to go. But before we do that buff out, in the very end of last episode, you remember where I faked the dent and we put the lacquer in it and we did the drop fill? Now it's time to address that. So what we need to do is get a straight razor with 2 pieces of tape on it to protect corners of it from gouging up our finish. Right where our drop fill is, we're just gonna slowly work our way, drag this across it, and knock off the top of it until we get a nice flat even spot. We don't want to go any lower than just enough so that it's perfectly even with the surface of the rest of the lacquer around it. It's gonna look all scratched up. And you're gonna have a little bit of a dull spot in that one place because of the razor blade, but we're about to do the final sand and buff out on this guitar, so who cares, right? Easy peasy. It doesn't take much work at all. We waited that full 2 weeks because we wanted the drop fill to shrink back the same amount as the rest of the lacquer. And with that, we're all caught up and we can move forward with the next step, which is the wet sanding process. All right, it's time to do another wet sand, and this one's gonna be the last one that we do. The cool thing is that we've already done this in earlier steps, so you're pretty familiar with the process. The main difference here is that we now have fully cured lacquer. It's really nice and hard at this point, and we're gonna be using crazy fine sandpapers. The coarsest sandpaper you wanna use with this is 800 grit. If you can get away with it, start with 1000. 800 grit sounds fine, but it's actually a pretty coarse sandpaper when it comes to finishing. And I hate to make it sound like I'm ragging on Matt, and I'm really not, but it happens so fast when he's sanded through.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna start off with is a 1000 grit, and we're gonna work our way all the way up to 5000 grit. The reason why we use so many different sandpapers is because each next level up of sandpaper is designed to remove the scratches from the sandpaper that came before it. And we're gonna be using this Festool sander. This is what I actually use it in my own shop. I love it because there actually are available sandpapers for it all the way up to 3000 grit, and it works well. But I would assume that the vast majority of you guys are actually gonna be doing this by hand. So you wanna be using the block that we used in previous episodes. But before we can get into it, we need to make sure that we don't have any areas on this guitar where we might have water intrusion. If you have any spots on your guitar at home that have bare wood, mask those off. On here, that work holding stick actually did all the masking for us, but it can be kind of hard to work around as we're doing all this buffing, so we've removed it, and we're gonna put some tape right here. It doesn't have to be pretty, it's just insurance to keep any of the overspray from getting on there. That's it. To seal these 2 spots where these screws were, I'm actually gonna use a number 10 super glue here. Drop it in there, and then we're gonna follow it up with just a little bit of accelerant, make it waterproof. That's all we're gonna do. Just because we have those masked off, we want to be aware of water intrusion. I know that on these guitars that have these pickup cavities cut into them, once we spray this with water, try to keep that as dry as you can inside there so that we don't get water intrusion into the fibers of the wood. It would be awful to have issues with that now. So we're gonna move the electric guitar neck out of the way because everything we do on the body, we're also gonna do to the neck, but for the purposes of this video, we're gonna be focusing on the body. I'm gonna have some shop towels at the go. Matt'll be my towel boy.
I got you, man. I got you.
A little spritz here. I remember that we do have a little bit of dish soap inside of here, hence the suds. That soap's just gonna be a nice lubricant.
And it smells nice too.
And it smells delicious.
Nice and clean.
Remember, we're not just gonna hog away material. We're trying to get a polish out of this. And we're gonna do 6 different grits of sandpaper, so it's not gonna happen all in one step. We're just slowly gonna get ourselves to a nice matte finish. And we're at the finish line, so we really need to make sure that we take extra care in keeping our work surface nice and clean and that we're not adding scratches. I'll flip it over and we'll do the same thing to the back side. I'm not going to just douse this whole thing in water. I just want to keep it wet.
I saw you being really careful to get the water out of those holes.
Yeah, I sanded and wiped. I just don't want it to pool up and then soak into the screw holes and swell up that wood. Don't be afraid of it, but just don't let it stand there. Keep it nice and fresh. We'll need to spend a little bit more time in that one spot where we did the drop fill, where we spent time with the razor blade, just because there's a little bit more scratches there. This 1000 grit just takes off such a little bit. This looks pretty good. As long as I'm like at least 50 to 60% rid of those little bit of orange peel defects, I can stop there. I'll be able to remove those even more with the next finer grit. If we spend a whole bunch of time with 1000 grit, then that's that many more 1000 grit scratches that we have to remove. I'm not focusing too much time on these little ridges and getting close to the edge because we don't want to burn through. Yes. A lot of you guys are going to be doing this by hand, so don't be fooled by how fast it's going here. With the power sander, it's so much quicker. If you're doing this by hand, just try to enjoy it. Try to figure out a way to be patient while also being exciting. Now's not the time to be like, okay, that's close enough, I'm gonna switch to the next grit. And then you go to buff it out and there's scratch marks all over it. 1500 grit, looking good. There's no orange peel left, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for. It can be difficult to see the difference between 1000 and 1500. It looks like a matte finish and then a very, very slightly less matte finish, but you can see the difference if you're using that glancing light technique. These sandpapers for these Festool sanders, once you get to 2000, they turn to these foamy pads, which are super cool because they're thicker, they follow the contours really nicely.
I noticed you're spending a lot more time in each area too. I guess that's because of the finer grit.
And I'm just being cautious, making sure that I'm covering every area. For me, what works is compartmentalizing each section. In my mind, create a grid, and I just kind of work myself around. What I'm looking for is a uniform sheen from the 2000 grit. If I see some areas that are less shiny, that means those areas need a little bit more work because I haven't removed the sheen from the 1500 grit yet. Once we're done with this 2000 grit, now it's turning into like almost a satin finish instead of a matte finish, which just makes me happy because I can stop using the word matte as much as I've been saying it.
It's really confusing. Every time I say like, what?
It's funny, like with this blue, man, I kind of like it with a satin finish. You can stop here if you want to. You can basically turn a gloss finish into a satin finish by kind of stopping in this 2000 to 3000 grit range, which is just a cool thing. It looks super good, but that's not what we're here for. We're gonna buff it out. We're now ready to switch over to a 3000 grit. This can be difficult to source out online or pretty much anywhere. Well, a few years ago, I was at my local automotive store and I found this 3M product called Trizact. They sell it in a 3000 and a 5000 grit. It is absolutely incredible stuff. They sell it in these large rectangular pieces like this. They're hook and loop on the back, which is super cool. And I'm actually able to then cut them into circles and they'll fit right on my Festool sander. So yeah, same thing. Yeah, so now we're getting into the shine.
Oh, much smoother, yeah.
If you're not seeing that shininess, that means that you did not do enough of a job of removing scratches in one of those earlier steps. So instead of continuing, go ahead and step back at least one level in your grit to try to remove those scratches. At this point, it's almost impossible for you to sand through. So at the 3000 grit, if you want to be a little bit more heavy-handed, especially if you're working by hand, you'd have to be here all afternoon to sand through. She's looking good, and we're gonna flip it and reverse it. Is your I said you can't mess it up, so let's prove it. We're gonna have Matt do it. So just take your time, nice and easy. All right, yep. Okay, so I said you couldn't screw it up. turns out good.
He absolutely underestimated me.
He didn't mess it up at all, but he did press a little too hard. It was actually squeezing out the water, essentially. He started to run out of water as a lubricant underneath it, so we started to see a little bit of fibers from the polishing paper.
Well, I'm always guilty of that. I always forget to just let the tool do the job.
Let the tool do the job.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have you do the exact same thing one more time, and just really take your time. Wasn't too bad. Wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
It's a good thing he doesn't get paid. That's looking super, super nice. So we're gonna switch over to our last and final 5,000 grit. This 5,000 grit stuff actually doesn't come in as big of sheets, so I have to cut one more tiny little section and make it work on here. Do what works. Ain't no rules. Absolutely. It's almost glossy.
Almost.
I mean to toot the old horn here, but she's looking good.
You should do this for a living.
Give you a nice little shot of what that's looking like so far. We are on the home stretch at this point, so I'm gonna put this away and do the handwork now. Insert cool 80s music here. Note about those sides, you're dealing with curves and they're gonna burn through quicker, so it actually goes even faster than the flat area. And don't worry that we're gonna re-scratch up a little bit of the stuff that we've already polished, because we're gonna keep working our way all the way up to the 5,000 grit and it's all gonna match.
It's fine, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Just come around the edge. You're not like getting onto the flat spots, because the buffer's gonna take out most of any issues on the corners anyway.
Okay.
There's a reason why the sides are my least favorite, and I waited till the end to do them. They're just time consuming. You just gotta do it. Embrace the suck.
Put on a nice movie, your favorite show.
Little podcast,
Yeah.
whatever education you want to catch up on, now's the time. If you're not able to get it to like the exact level of sheen that you are at the top and the back, that's okay. I mean, I strive for that, but if you're not able to get that, when you go to do the buff out, it's actually easy to polish the sides. They just take to it a lot easier, so you should be able to get rid of any of those issues. The same thing will happen to you when you start working on the neck of the guitar. It takes to polish super, super fast because it's all curves. There's no flat spots on it. Rolling, rolling, rolling. All right, here we go. 5,000. All right, so I think that's gonna do it for us. We just took that all the way from 1,000 grit to 5,000 grit by hand. Of course, you guys get to see a little montage there, but collectively, I think we spent maybe a half an hour to get all the sides completely hand sanded and looking good, just like the top and the back. So it's time to buff this bad boy out now. Can you believe it, Matt?
No.
We're here. We're finally here.
We made it.
We are at the finish line on this guitar and we're ready to do the high buff out on it. There are 4 ways that we can go about doing this. The first one, which is probably the most common and what a lot of you guys at home are going to be doing, and it is a hand buff with wet compounds. A way to think about polishing compounds is like a liquefied sandpaper. The grit is just finely ground up and suspended in like almost like a lotion. There are several different companies that sell wet polishing compounds. This one right here by Colortone, same company that we've been using this whole time to spray these guitars. They work really, really good. They have it in 3 different grits, a medium, a fine, and a swirl remover. And that's just the name of the Colortone's most fine finish. So we can go from a high cut to a high polish with no issues. You need that and a lint-free cloth that you can just do a hand rub on here. Anybody can do it. And good news is it's super cheap. And it's not loud. If you live in an apartment where you can't bother folks, it's silent. The downside is that it's really labor intensive, time consuming, and you're not going to get that super, super, super high shine finish. You're gonna get like 85 to 90% of the way there, depending on how patient you are, but it's just not gonna quite be there. The second method would be to use those same wet polishing compounds and get what are called buffs and attach them to a drill. Price of entry, really easy. And now we've added some mechanical leverage to the whole system and it goes a lot faster and you're gonna be able to get a better quality finish. The downside to using that drill method is the technique can be hard to master. A little bit like riding a bucking bull. You're holding this drill and it's spinning and it wants to go all over the place. It can be awkward to hold and it's pretty easy to cause some damage. So if you are going to use that method, I definitely recommend that you find something to practice on. The third method, which is the method that Matt and I use in our shop, is the dry buffing compound method using a full buffing arbor. And these are the same techniques that you use at the big factory level. That's the only way to get that absolutely perfect finish. The downside to those are that they're expensive and they take up a lot of space, and most importantly, it's really easy to mess up a guitar.
They're really powerful.
They're very, very powerful. They will rip a guitar out of your hands quicker than you can blink and smash it onto the ground. And they'll also burn through the finish very, very quickly. And ask me how I know.
Respect the buffing wheel.
Respect the buffing wheel. And now they're awesome and I use them all the time, but I've also been doing it for years. I recommend those for people who are looking to get into this as a profession or a very serious hobby. Definitely worth it if that's going to be the case. Now, the method that we're going to be using today, the fourth method, is a little bit of a hybrid approach to those first two. We're going to be using the wet compounds, but we're actually going to be using one of these automotive buffers. This is an awesome one by Griot's. You can get these at your local automotive store. It's kind of the same benefits to an electric drill, except the ergonomics of it are a lot better. There's nice variable speed, it's got an easy to handle trigger, and readily available buffs. The price of entry on this is actually really nice too, anywhere between $50 and $200. And you've got something that's going to give you pretty close to that super, super high-end finish. And you can make the sales pitch to your significant other that, well, it's not for the guitars, it's for the car. If you ever looked at the price of like buffing out your headlights and having that service done, it can be like $200-300. Well, you can do that yourself with not only with this, but with this. All right, now that we know what technique we're going to use, we can go about buffing this bad boy out. So we've got our work holding stick reattached to the guitar. It's in the clamp, and we've put this piece of foam under here just so that we have some work stability. If you don't have this set up, definitely fold up a towel, put it on the workbench. At this point, it should be like a clean space. I have messed up more guitars than I could count because I just didn't take the time to clean up my workbench. Now, instead of the medium compound, we're actually going to start off with the fine. Medium is pretty coarse. We can look at this and see that it already is really well polished. I think that we'd be taking a step backwards if we went with the medium. For those of you that don't know what to start with, err on the side of caution and try fine. If it's not really doing a whole lot for you, then go back to something a little bit more coarse. We're going to use these foam buffs. There's other options that are out there, but these ones are my favorite. They hold the compound really well. So all we do is stick this on here, apply a little bit of our compound, give it a little bit of a shake. You don't want to just like crank this thing on. You're going to end up making a huge mess. There we go. That feels pretty good. And then I'm just going to rub that in just a little bit before I turn it on. Put some safety glasses on and I wear an apron. This can get splattery. What I'm going to do is I'm going to buff this half of it and then show you guys how much of a difference it's making. Doing 50% overlaps and working ourselves around. Like, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it. It's just almost the weight of your hand. Let the machine do the work.
Let the tool do the work.
Be very aware, once again, that you can burn through the finish, especially around the edges, so just be cautious. I'm gonna apply just a little bit more compound. It tends to burn through the compound very quick at first because the buff just doesn't have much on it. We don't want it to run too dry. You also don't want it to be just dripping in compound. Just one more quick pass across here with the fine compound. Use a microfiber cloth. We just want to be careful not to reintroduce any scratches. A terry cloth is also good. It's almost like conditioner in your hair. It just has like such a nice like soft feel to it now. So I've got a couple of little spots over here that are just a little bit deeper of scratches. Just for that one section, we're gonna go back and hit it with the medium to try to get rid of those scratches and then catch it back up. So, nothing to panic about. And the other thing that I want to point out is we didn't notice those until we started getting a more high quality polish on the guitar. So, you'll start to see those things. All right, that's the medium. Let's get a look and see it's all gone. You saw there how working a little bit backwards sometimes is very useful. You can really see how much of a difference just this first level of buff has done on the guitar. We're only a third of the way into it and it's already looking super, super good. We've got a side over here that is very shiny, and then the moment we bring it over here, you can see how much more dull of a look we're getting. You're not quite getting that sharpness around the edges. So I think that's a good illustration of what we are looking for with this. So what I'm gonna do based off of what I saw here, is just keep the medium compound across the whole top here, then we'll switch to the fine.
I swear, dude, I'm just gonna get this all over you.
Okay, we're gonna hit the whole rest of the thing. Now, I think that looks super good. It's important to note that we're never gonna use the same buff with multiple different compounds. Before we got started, I put numbers on the back of these, 1, 2, and that one has a 3 on it. It's just my way of knowing this is coarse, this is medium, and that one over there is fine. So, putting the number 2 back on. I've been doing this for like 15 years, and I always still get really excited about the buff out. It's always like all that hard work is starting to pay off. She looks good. It actually is crazy how much the sponge soaks it up. So far with this particular buffer, it doesn't seem to be heating it up too much, and that's something, depending on the buffer that you're using, is if it starts to get real warm when you're doing it, be conscious of that because you're gonna melt the lacquer if it becomes too hot. So if you've got one that's like spinning at a super high rate, that might be an issue. But man, she's looking good. Hold the phones, people, we're not there yet. The swirl remover is that little cherry on top for us. If this doesn't scratch all your itches, you can find even higher levels of polish. 3M, for example, and Meguiar's, they have some polishes that can go up to like these astronomical levels of shine. You will be limited by your method though. Part of getting this super high quality finish is the speed and that little bit of heat that it applies to it. And it's almost impossible to get that when you're applying it by hand. I mean, if you're super patient, you're gonna have like this giant right arm.
Look like Popeye over here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just be like, what happened to you? I was buffing out my guitar for the last month. Hit me. Yeah. Fun fact, I learned that they're called buffs for this video series. The nice thing about these Strat style guitars, you have this giant pick guard that covers up pretty much everything except for here and here. So yeah, I want this to look as best as possible, but my main priority is in spaces that will not have a pick guard on it. Man, that looks really good.
Yeah.
This looks as good as if I had a full buffing arbor system, honestly. So we're gonna flip it over and let Matt give her a run for her money. You just throw a paper towel on there. That's good. Don't mess it up. Oh, hang on. Also, don't turn the buffer on until the buffer is on the guitar, because what you end up with is splatter everywhere. So set it on there, then turn it on. That was my bad. I forgot to tell him that. I forgot to tell him that. A little bit slower with your motion. All right, so what are we looking for? What are we doing? What you thinking?
So I want to look for any obvious scratches and focus on those areas, any places where there might need just a little bit more time spent. I'm going to break it up into quadrants and work my way systematically around, being careful mostly around this leading edge here and being careful not to hit these corners too hard.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Just take your time with it and just do those nice even passes.
50% overlap.
Yeah. A little slower. I keep telling him just a little bit slower. His tendency is just to go a little bit fast, which is good. I kind of scared him a little bit with the sandpaper. So now you're a little bit gun shy, right? About being in one spot for too long.
Oh,
well, with the buffer, we can go slower with it now. We've gotten to such fine compounds at this point that you're not gonna really burn through the finish in the blink of an eye, but he's scared. He's operating scared, and that's good in this case. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's put some more medium on there. Come around and just give me like a little 45 all the way around the edge. Good, you did good.
Thanks.
To my eye, I don't see any obvious areas that need more time on it, so we can switch out now. Once again, don't mix buffs, don't mix buffs. The medium does the heavy lifting, and then the fine's a little bit less work. And by the time we get to swirl,
we're averaging out
exactly
smaller and smaller hills. Yeah.
can't teach you anything. He lifted up the buffer while it was still spinning at full speed. I was like, man, is it snowing in here? Looks super good. Wiper down. I think that we've got that. And then we're gonna put this swirl remover on, and dude.
Yeah.
Looks super good, dude.
Sweet.
Super, super good. The back in some ways can be a little bit more difficult just because there's so much flat area. It's like super unforgiving. You're gonna see it if there's mess ups, but this looks super good. We'll call the body done. We're gonna flip it over so that I can see it a little bit better. So this works really well with a work holder like this. You might find that you don't really have a safe way to clamp it, and what I would recommend is just doing the sides by hand if that's the case. Don't use a power buffer. So that goes really fast because we're close to the edge and we're on round areas, especially at the tips of these horns right here. Just be super careful because you can just go through it really fast. It just takes a couple seconds to get it buffed up. We are going to do these same techniques to the neck of the guitar off camera, but it's the same thing. No different, no different. All right, so we flipped it over. We've got the medium compound. We're gonna do the same thing. This area on this style of guitar is super thin, and we've actually already pretty much buffed it when we did the front and the back, so we're mostly focusing on here and this little spot here. I'm not even gonna put any more on here, honestly, because it's such a small area. We're not even gonna add any more. Cool. All right, so we're gonna wipe this off. The only spot we have left to do is the insides of those cutaways, but the bulk of our buffing is complete and it's looking super, super good. This is kind of gonna be a little bit finicky, so I think what I'm gonna do is hold it by my spray stick here and just kind of get in here and rub. It's kind of nice that we get to do this little spot by hand because this is gonna be similar to what you would be doing at home if you don't have a buffer or a drill buff. I find that these little blue paper towels work actually pretty well for this. I'm gonna use that. You can also use terry cloths. Starting with a medium, we're just gonna do fine swirls and work ourselves around. This is not going to be as good of a shine as we probably have on the rest of the guitar now, only because this is just an inferior way of doing it. Unless you were to spend hours and hours. You could spend hours and hours doing this. You could be watching TV, just buffing it out, which there's nothing wrong with that. But we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go from a medium to a fine and to a swirl remover. My right arm is already tired. I find that it works well to get it nice and folded. Get yourself a nice pad underneath your two fingers, and then just go like this. Matt's left-handed, so this can be a little bit awkward for him too.
Yeah, I'm over here trying to do this right-handed.
And you got to.
Luckily, I'm ambidextrous.
Jesus. That's it, folks. Shut it down. Ambidextrous. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. Yeah, can you imagine doing the whole guitar like this? Cool, man. I think that looks good. We'll do the swirl remover, and we're gonna be done.
All right.
All right, so we're gonna wipe it down, get rid of any residue that might be left on here. That polishing compound can get a little messy. This is my favorite part, is when you're done with it and it's super smooth and it looks really good. We've got the neck all buffed out too. We did that off camera. It looks super good. I don't know what more you could ask for. I just don't. I mean,
yeah.
Look at this guitar I just bought at the store. Before we can marry the neck to the body, what we need to do is remove the tape off of there. seems like, well, yeah, you just pull the tape off. You could do that, but you really have a high likelihood of trying to pull this off and then chipping out the clear coat that you've applied right here along the edge. So we're gonna remove this tape by using a sanding block, either a 400 grit, a 600 grit. We don't wanna go any more coarse than that because what we don't wanna do is put some ugly scratch marks on the side of our fret. So I'm gonna start with a 400 grit. You don't have to have one of these sanding blocks. A piece of wood works really well, but it needs to be nice and stiff. I'm actually gonna fold it over the sides, and we are gonna go at about a 45-degree angle, just back and forth. But don't come this way with it where you're sanding the finish that you've just sprayed and buffed out. Make sure you stay on top of the frets. And if you're doing it right, you wanna just kiss the wood of the fretboard. Just absolutely kiss the edge of it. And we're just gonna knock off that edge. You can see how this is gonna be reminiscent of how we applied it, right? And then we're gonna do the same thing on this side. Feels good, looks good. Okay, let's see, I need a razor blade. What we're really looking for is that when we pull our tape off, what we're not getting is a bunch of clear finish chipping off. That's the main goal, right? And dismount. Exactly. The judges give it a 7.5. Okay, it transitions from the lacquer to the bare wood really nicely. And if you wanted to, now that it's off, you could actually do like a 600, 800, 1000 grit and just do that same thing, and it's gonna give you a nice polish to the edges of your frets. So obviously a little bit of kind of just cleaning up little edges here, maybe a little bit of that mucky water got underneath the tape, but that's fine. So what we need to do now is put some strings on it, right?
Yeah.
Dude.
Looks
Strings
great.
on it.
Yeah.
It looks so freaking good. We had Matt do the soldering on the output jack on the guitar. A quick little setup. It's not fully dialed in just yet, but holy cow. We've worked so hard to get to this point. I swear you would never know that this isn't one that we bought in the store.
Seriously.
This looks exactly like if we sprayed it with HVLP. Well worth the effort, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Hey guys.
Oh, hey Dan.
Hey,
Good to see ya.
too,
Thanks for
man.
coming by.
See you, man.
Wow.
What do you think, man?
God. It's so level and flat. It's hard to even believe. It's beautiful. I'm really impressed.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And I've never done this good with aerosols. Tried.
I'll take that one.
Thanks, man.
Is this for sale? How long does it take to do this?
This one from start to finish is about 21 days total, but of course that includes 2 weeks of dry time.
That's always been my problem, is I get too anxious or have to get it done. Even with the spray gun and stuff.
Exactly. Sure. I always say, and I tell Matt all the time too, like it's just a game of patience with finish work. Let the finish do the work for you. And I think that that is key to getting it to look this way, just being patient with it, applying the coats, letting it gas off, and then more importantly, when you're fully done spraying it, giving it all that time to dry. And I mean, I think the results pretty much speak for themselves.
There's no ripples or anything.
Nothing.
If that's how you get this flat finish, I'm gonna try it. Have you played it?
We actually haven't even plugged it in yet, so let's plug it in, see what she sounds like, right? What do you think?
Yeah.
Play a couple licks.
Just put strings on it, so we'll see. Not bad, right?
That's a blues guitar.
Nice.
So the finish clearly contributes to the tone, as we all know. All right, folks, that takes us to completion on this amazing project. It's been a long journey, 3 episodes with a whole bunch of information inside of it, but you can see the results speak for themselves. We got to hear what it sounded like. We got to have Dan come by and check it out. And we got his seal of approval, which is huge for me because I've been watching Dan since I first got started. If you guys followed along, you should have something pretty close to this. But remember, this is your first try for a lot of you guys, and it may not have come out perfect. And that's fine, because I guarantee you, if you could see some of my early work, you'd be like, really? Maybe you should hang it up. But you know what I did? I just kept going and I kept going and I kept going. You're gonna learn from your mistakes. I mean, we had a mistake or 2 in this video series where we recovered from it. Part of becoming a good guitar builder and finisher and a luthier just requires you to fail sometimes. All you can hope for is that you recover for them as best you can, and hopefully that you learn something by doing it. And keep trying, and you're gonna get better and better. So with that, I think that me and Matt will wrap this up, and we want to say thank you so much to StewMac for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had so much fun being here in Athens.
Yeah,
so we
what
get,
a treat.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
get to go back home and make some more videos on our own channel, so you guys can check us out there. And yeah, we got to catch a plane soon, so we're
That's
going to
right.
go do that. And thank you guys. We appreciate you.